Welcome to this presentation. Today we are going to see about file transfer protocol. Transferring files from one computer to another is one of the most common tasks expected from a networking or internet networking environment. As a matter of fact, the greatest volume of data exchange in the internet today is due to file transfer only. So now let's discuss about one popular protocol involved in transferring files, that is called file transfer protocol. File transfer protocol is the standard mechanism provided by TCP/IP for copying a file from one host to another. Although transferring files from one system to another seems simple and straightforward, some problems must be dealt with first. For example, two systems may use different file name conventions. Two systems may have different ways to represent text and data. Two systems may have different directory structures. All these problems have been solved by FTP in a very simple and elegant approach. Now let's see. FTP differs from other client-server applications in that it establishes two connections between the host. One connection is used for data transfer, the other for control information, that is commands and responses or the control information, right? Separation of commands and data transfer makes FTP more efficient. The control connection uses very simple rules for communication. We need to transfer only a line of command or a line of response at a time. The data connection, on the other hand, needs more complex rules due to the variety of data types transferred. However, the difference in complexity is at the FTP level, not TCP. So for TCP, both connections are treated the same. FTP uses two well-known TCP ports. Port 21 is used for control connection and port 20 is used for data connection. So FTP uses the services of TCP. And now what you see here is the basic model of FTP. The client has three components. You can see here, that is user interface, then client control process and client data transfer process. The server has only two components, that is server control process and server data transfer process. The control connection is made between the control processes. The data connection is made between the data transfer processes, as you can see. So the control connection is here and the data connection is here, right? The control connection remains connected during the entire interactive FTP session. And the data connection is opened and then closed for each file transferred. It opens each time commands that involve transferring files are used, and it closes when the file is transferred. In other words, you can say that when a user starts an FTP session, the control connection opens, and when the control connection is open, the data connection can be opened and closed multiple times if several files are transferred. Now let's see how FTP uses the same approach as SMTP to communicate across the control connection. It uses 7-bit ASCII character, right? Okay. Now let's see this 7-bit ASCII character, that is and this communication is achieved through commands and responses. The simple method is adequate for control connection because we send one command or response at a time. And each command or response is only one short line, so we need not worry about the file format or file structure. Each line is terminated with a 2-character end of line token. That is 2-character line means carriage return and line feed end of connection. In communication, that is the purpose of the data connection is different from that of control connection. If you want to transfer files through data connection, file transfer occurs over the data connection and the control of commands sent over the control connection. However, we should remember that the file transfer in FTP means 3 points has to be remembered. One is a file that has to be copied from the server to the client. This is called retrieving a file, and this is done under the supervision of RETR command, right? And file is to be copied from the client to the server. This is called storing a file. It is done under the supervision of STOR command. and a list of directory or file names is to be sent from the server to the client, and this is done under the supervision of list command, list command, right? And we can notice that FTP treats a list of directory or file names as a file. It is sent over the data connection. The client must define the type of file to be transferred, the structure of the data, and the transmission mode. Before sending the file, that is in this diagram, before sending the file through a data connection, we prepare for transmission through control connection. The heterogeneity problems is resolved by defining the three attributes of communication: file type, data structure, and transmission mode. FTP can transfer some of the following file types across the data connection. That is, it may be an ASCII file or EBC DIC file or image file. The ASCII file is the default format for transferring text files. Each character is encoded using 7-bit ASCII, and the sender transforms the file from its own representation into ASCII characters, and the receiver transforms the ASCII characters into its own representation. If one or both ends of the connections use EBC DIC encoding, the file can be transferred using EBC DIC encoding. The image file is the default format for transferring binary files. The file is sent as a continuous stream of bits without any interpretation or encoding, and this is mostly used to transfer binary files such as compiled programs. Data structures FTP can transfer a file across the data connection by using one of the following interpretations across the structure of data, that is file structure, record structure, and page structure. In the file structure format, the file is a continuous stream of bytes. In the record structure, the file is divided into records, and this can be used only with text files. In the page structure, the file is divided into pages, with each page having a page number and page header. The pages can be stored and accessed randomly and sequentially. FTP can transfer a file across the data connection by using one of the three transmission modes like stream mode, block mode, and compressed mode. The stream mode is the default mode. Data are delivered from FTP to TCP as a continuous stream of bytes. TCP is responsible for chopping the data into segments of appropriate size. If the data are simply a stream of bytes, that is in file structure format, no end of file is needed. End of file in this case is the closing of data connection by the sender. If the data are divided into records, that is in record structure, each record will have 1 byte end of record, and end of the file will have 1 byte end of file, that is UOF character. In block mode, data can be delivered from FTP to TCP in blocks. So in this case, each block is preceded by a 3-byte header. The first byte is called the block descriptor, and the next 2 bytes define the size of the blocks in bytes. So in compressed mode, if the file is big, then in the consecutive appearances of the data unit are replaced by 1 occurrence and the number of repetitions. In a text file, this is usually spaces. In a binary file, null characters are usually compressed. And now let's see the 2 connections used in FTP. And the 2 connections in FTP have different lifetimes. The control connections remains connected during the entire interactive FTP session, and the data connection is opened and then closed for each file transfer activity. It opens each time commands that involve transferring files are used, and it closes when the file is transferred completely. For control communication, FTP uses the same approach as Telnet. It uses the NBT ASCII character set as used by Telnet. And communication is achieved through commands and responses, and the simple method is adequate for control connection because we send 1 command at a time, and each line is terminated with a 2-character end-of-line token. So during this control connection, commands are sent from the client to the server, and responses are then sent from the server to the client. Commands which are sent from the FTP client control process are in the form of ASCII uppercase, which may or may not be followed by an argument. So now let's see some of the common commands in this table. So abort means About the previous command, cdup means change the parent directory, cwd means change to another directory, and DLE means delete a file, list means list subdirectories or files, mkd means it creates a make directory, so it creates new directory, pass means password, and PASV means server chooses a post, and port means client chooses a port, PWD means display name of the current directory, quit means log out of the system, RETR means retrieve files, files are transformed from server to client, RMD means delete a directory, RNFR is the identify a file to be named, renamed, RNTO is rename the file, and STOR stored files or files are transferred from client to server, STRU define data organization, and type is the default file type, user is user information, and mode is defined transmission the mode. That is S means stream, and B means block, and C means compressed mode. So the data connection here uses the well-known port 20 at the server side. Now the creation of data connection is different from the control connections. So we have to follow the 3 steps. And the first step is the client, not the server. Client issues the passive open using a ephemeral port, and this must be done by the client because it is the client that issues the commands for transferring files. And the second step is using the port command. The client sends the port number to the server, and the server services the port number and issues the active open using the well-known port number 20 and received ephemeral port number. Thank you.